Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I am Nathan Shields, and joining me is longtime buddy, friend, partner, Will Humphreys. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Good to see you again, Nate. I'm always excited to be on the show. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's been a few episodes, so it's good to have you back, man. Let's talk about it. Let's get into it right now. Traditional PT business models will die if they don't pivot. And I'm not sure where you were going with this. I was like, why is that possible? But as we started talking about, that's totally possible, right?
I think it's a guarantee. Here's the climate on this. As one of my friends, Seth Coulter, once said, we sharpen the knives that slit our own throat. And just over time, we've gotten our industry to a point, and this is going to sound really scary because it is, but there's also a lot of cool things behind this. I just want to preface that piece of it. But look, straightforward. We have increasing interest rates, which are, that's a temporary problem. We've seen that before in the early 2000s. Here's what we didn't have is a bunch of students with an average student loan debt of $155,000 in student loan debt. They're coming in at starting salaries that haven't changed in the last 30 years because we haven't gotten high reimbursement in 30 years. If anything, it's gone down. And so this bottleneck, and then the demand for our service has gone up. So it's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. This little window of profitability keeps getting pinched, and PT owners are feeling that more now than ever. And now we're talking about major attacks on reimbursement. We're talking about, not the brightest economic forecast over the next 10 years. Some are saying 2030. Experts that I follow are saying 2030 could begin the largest depression the world has ever seen. So we're in a position as physical therapists where if we keep doing what we've always done, there is no world where we are going to survive in 5 years, is my estimate.
Yeah.
If we don't pivot. Now, again, the pivoting is where there's hope and potential, but the old days of hanging the shingle, going to work, just wishing you had more new patients isn't enough. And it's pretty scary.
Yeah, I can see what you mean by traditional business model, because when you look at it, what we grew up doing in our businesses 20 years ago when we started was, hang our shingle, talk to the doctors, get referrals, find an EMR, find a front desk person, and then market the doctors, get word of mouth referrals, that kind of stuff, and take all the insurances, right?
Yeah.
Take them all. No discrimination, just take them all.
$30? Okay. We don't want to offend the doctor or the population, so let's take everything and just not see our kids ever.
Right. Hopefully we'll make it up in volume.
Yeah, right. Oh, and do we make it up in volume? Gosh.
Or we consider those loss leaders, right?
Yeah.
No. So if that's the traditional model that you and I are used to and they're going off of, totally agree. That model will die if they don't do some kind of pivoting, they have to change and they have to keep up with the day. It also goes back to what you shared with me a couple months ago, and that is AI is going to make a significant impact on on the medical profession.
Yes.
Right? We're already talking about robots doing surgeries, being capable of doing surgeries better than the actual human physician, and being able to do them 24/7 without vacations and weekends that current surgeons use. And they'll be very proficient and capable of performing those surgeries. That's tip of the iceberg of what could change in the medical field, right?
Absolutely. So the conference I went to kind of set the stage, because I don't think I shared it on the podcast, but I went to this conference for this organization called YPO. YPO is a very elite group of I'm not a part of it, by the way. It's a very elite group of very high income earning entrepreneurs or CEOs of publicly traded companies. So we're talking billionaires, no exaggeration. The guy who delivered it, I'll give you his name so you can put it into the notes of this podcast on the back end, but he's an 8 times New York Times best-selling author.
Mm-hmm.
He has a medical degree from Harvard and an engineering degree from MIT, and he associates with Elon Musk on some of his businesses. And so he sat there and spoke to this very elite group. I got invited by a mutual friend of ours who is in that group because he owns a software company, and is very rich now. But I was able to go and participate, and it blew my mind because they were sharing about how AI and biotech is the future. The two domains to tell our kids to get into for jobs down the road is biotech and cybersecurity. He says those two things are going to be the ultimate professions in the next 3 to 5 years. He was describing these things, and literally there was this one study that he showed where like just using sample data from patient histories with a specific type of potential cancer, that the AIs were 85%, I'm estimating, but it's close to that, 85% accurate in diagnosing this very difficult disease based off of the subjective and objective reporting, whereas human doctors were roughly 35 to 40% accurate. And so this doctor, I have a video of it, of him saying, I'm out of a job, because his job as a diagnostician, he's going in there looking at all the data and all the information and this compute. And what's crazy about AI is it's constantly learning. So like as they get more data, the more accurate they become. How does it affect physical therapy? Well, this AI is one of the accelerants to either snuff out our industry or will be a tool that we use to promote independence in usage. So if we aren't aggressively harnessing that, what can I use AI for? You had a podcast recently about that. What came up from that podcast? Is it just
that's exactly what he did. That was one of his doctoral researchers. It was Pedro Teixeira of Prediction Health, and he's using AI right now to help PTs be compliant in their documentation and bill correctly. So it will assess all your documentation, what you did, and say, this verbiage might be needed to justify that code, or because you did this exercise, you might want to build this code versus that code, right? And so that's just the beginnings, but he has big plans for how it can guide care. Like these types of techniques help with these types of diagnoses best. And so it will start guiding care. And you can imagine what insurance companies are going to do with that, right? Like, if it takes that skill away from the physical therapists and puts it in the hand of an AI software, if you think reimbursement's poor now, just wait for something like that, right? You got to be able to manipulate and stand out in spite of stuff like that.
100%. And it's very educational what you just said there, because ultimately, if we are proactive, we can use it as a tool. So that could just be one of many pivots that an owner could make by getting used to AI. If you're not sure how to do that, download ChatGPT on your phone, or just start getting to that website and start anything you have to do. Just ask it. I've been using it when I'm coaching for job descriptions. I actually created a job scorecard for a PT in ChatGPT, advertisements for patients that can go in newspapers, like anything that you can think of, ChatGPT can create it.
Social media content.
If you need to if you've never done reviews with employees, hey, ChatGPT, create a review form for me to give to a physical therapist who's at 6 months, who has performed, like you can be as whatever you want it to be. Yeah. That's just to make things easier.
I did the same thing yesterday. I actually compared ChatGPT with Google Bard. I asked the same question. It was, give me a 4,000 word description for the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast that would create engagement. And they give me this 4,000.
Bold.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to take those and like cut and paste, and it was amazing what it spit out. I'll put it on Apple iTunes as my podcast description soon. So yes, being aware of what AI can do. Right now, all I've seen is Prediction Health, and if Prediction Health is there, and he's been working on this for like 4 or 5 years, then there's other softwares that even in the beginning stages now will be out there in 4 to 5 years, and you better be used to it or comfortable with the lingo.
Yeah, there's if you think about pivoting, I think you hit upon something really important, was that there's 2 types of pivots as far as like we're going to talk about today. One is pivoting into tools that we can leverage to accelerate our effectiveness. The other one is the model itself. Like, how can we pivot the PT model itself? So AI falls in that category of like PT tools that we can start learning and harnessing. And again, the biggest cancer of our industry is that because we're so under reimbursed, PTs are driving themselves so exhausted that the only self-work they do is listening to your podcast as they're driving to work in some cases. And not to minimize that, as that's better than a lot of other PTs who don't, but they need more than that. They need to take what they learn on this podcast, like building some time out to learn the tools or pivot their model in order for them to be successful.
Right. And I think a lot of that is, you can do a lot of learning, you can read a lot of books, you can watch all the webinars, listen to the podcast, but at some point you have to start implementing. Right?
Yeah.
If you listen to if you were listening to my podcast and you're in the same situation that you were 6 months ago, then it has been no value to you. You might as well have saved the brainwaves and not listened to my podcast.
Yeah, and listen to Adele, who's amazing.
Right.
Is the voice of an angel. No, but so do you, by the way. I've always told you have the most amazing radio voice.
Yes.
I always feel like when people listen to us interview, I always feel like they have like a professional podcaster and Mickey Mouse on the line at the same time. Oh boy, I love physical therapy. That kind of thing. That was pretty good, by the way.
That wasn't bad.
I've done that.
I was impressed.
Thanks. Anyway,
Yeah. So people have to implement, and sometimes that's difficult. And I'm leading into one of the things that I would say pivot into is get some coaching. And in this case, that means accountability. So if you're listening to the podcast, reading the books, and you're not getting some coaching, or if you're not implementing, then you need some help to help guide you into what you need to do, hold you accountable to what you need to do to improve your business.
Absolutely. It was so funny because you and I did not talk about this in detail before we hit record. The number one pivot that I thought of is what you mentioned in terms of leadership. Like the summary could be the word leadership development. And, people are like, well, how is that a pivot? Well, it's the water of pivot. It fits all vessels because no matter what you're going to pivot into, we're going to need a coach, someone who's either done what we want to do or someone who's been successful at getting somewhere we want to go or helping others. Mm-hmm. And so for you to say that is so perfect because no matter what we do to pivot, like we could also get overwhelmed by the ideas of how to pivot. And if we don't have a guiding star, which is the investment in a coach, then we're going to potentially run ourselves ragged and not make progression. So yeah, I agree with you. I think the first and foremost important ways to pivot is to find a coach, or if you've already got a coach and you love them, great. Just start leveraging them with this type of verbiage to get them more of a product.
Yeah. And that coach definitely needs to give you some guidance. Like, where do you want to be this next year? What do you want to accomplish in this next year? Be clear with them so that he can guide you in the directions that you actually want to go and not where he wants you to go and not leaving it up to the wind. Right. So it's important to make sure you and the coach are on the same page, but they also could and should be helping you drop the $30 a visit insurances. I mean, if you're not talking about that with your coach, then you're doing yourself a disservice because you need to be increasing your profit margins. You need to get a return on investment, both in the business, out of the coach, you name it. And you can't do that with insurances that are paying below your expense rates.
Absolutely. You've helped people do that.
If you haven't listened and don't know that I'm a coach, then that helps people drop insurances, then you're not listening very well.
I just don't think I think understandably, you just don't self-promote enough. That's why whenever I'm on your show, I make a point of doing it because again, I would have sacrificed, not a limb, but I would have sacrificed maybe like a finger to have avoided so many years of like pain and suffering to have had a coach like you and now you're growing into a whole system there. So yeah, like this is a no-brainer. If people have been listening to this and they haven't been taking action, just give you a call. It's not a commitment to sign up, but to at least understand what's out there. You would be, anyway, I think you're one of the best deals out there for sure in terms of what you bring in terms of value. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And absolutely, you've helped, we had a call, I don't know if I can mention his name for privacy, but you sent somebody to my Rockstar Recruiter program. You referred them to me and I ended up having him on one of my YouTube channel pieces because with your help, he dropped like a couple of his lowest paying insurances. It like tripled his profitability and he was seeing like he was less busy and more productive. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, there is gold in them hills, man. Helping people figure that out alone is the ultimate pivot. I would say this arguably, if PTs can work with a coach to just learn how to change their reimbursement structure like you've done, that's all they need to do. Period. Because then you're just developing, because we're not worried about patients, guys. Stop worrying about new patients if you're listening to this. Everyone's so worried about it. Start worrying about recruiting. Start worrying about getting paid for what you're currently doing. And maybe there's a world where you can see way fewer patients and make more per patient so that you have tons of energy to go home to your kids with more profits. That is absolutely what's potential here. I think all the other companies are going to die off, which are going to feed more new patients to us anyway.
Right.
So I think that's the real like silver lining in today's message. Mm-hmm. Like for people who are going to pivot, they're going to kill it and live their dream at a level that they wouldn't maybe been able to do when they were just kind of comfortable.
And the proof is in the pudding because you see cash pay offices opening up quite a bit. Aaron LeBauer has a following. I know Joey Albritton has a following of cash pay clinics out there that are doing just fine. What they've learned that the insurance taking clinics have not learned is how to sell their services.
Yes.
You have to, number one, believe that your services are of value, right? And then number two, learn how to sell them appropriately. Get to the patient's pain points, because if they recognize that you are the solution to their problem, they will pay for that, right? And so it's important to recognize that cash pay could be a pivot that you make. You could be doing, if you're dropping some insurances, well, what does your cash pay model look like? You could do a hybrid. There's plenty of people that are telling you their United Healthcare patients in particular, once they go out of network with that contract, okay, you're going to be out of network. Here's our cash pay rate, and we'll go with that. And the people that have done it thus far are telling me it's amazing how much better life is in general without the low-paying insurances. The headache is significantly less. The payment, the reimbursement per visit is better, and they're not as busy. And patients are able to come in more frequently because there's space to put them in if they need to reschedule.
And the quality of the people are better. And I'm not saying the people aren't quality. When I talk about quality, I'm talking about alignment. I'm not talking about financial background or anything else. When someone's in enough pain, I don't care what their personal circumstances are financially, with the exception of some dire straits kind of thing. But most middle-class Americans, which is most of what we serve, lower to middle class, they will pay the money if they really knew what you could produce for them. And when we can message it correctly, we don't realize, I think, is that when we drop the lowest paying insurances and we are taking cash pay or higher paying insurances, is that the alignment of the patient to us is so much higher that those people aren't the ones that drain our energy. Those are ones who feed us energy, that help us live where we grow. A quick example of that would be in Rockstar Recruiter. When I started Rockstar Recruiter, the initial fee for that was $2,000. It was a 6-month program, $2,000. And I had okay success. When I raised that price to what I knew it was worth, and people started showing up in that regard, that's when they started getting results, because when people pay, they show up. And when they show up and the quality is good, then it goes well. So like to your point, maybe some PTs just struggle with like self-belief that maybe they're not good enough. I used to struggle with that for sure. But when I look back, like a lot of it was the patient engagement and alignment. I think PTs would feel a lot more effective if they were taking cash pay or high paying insurances, because those people show up, they don't miss appointments, they get better. And then that makes us, in that case, we're more clear what kind of value we create. We all need coaching to get there, back to the main point.
Right. Exactly. Well, other things that people are doing nowadays to pivot and to get away from the traditional model, and some of these are rather basic when it comes to coaching and dropping insurances, maybe adding some more cash pay, and not at $60 a visit, by the way. We're talking at least $150 a visit, please.
That was exactly the number I thought. No kidding.
At least, right?
At least.
Yeah, at least. But other ways to pivot is also considering what other revenue streams can you generate besides physical therapy revenue alone. And let's get past like selling supplies. I mean, that really doesn't generate a lot of money, whether it's orthotics or more TheraBand.
Cold packs.
Yeah. You're not going to make a huge revenue stream off of that. But other concepts that are out there. I've interviewed Stephen Rapicelli about his Stretch Labs concept. I think he called it Stretchplex, where they offer a la carte menu of modalities to people. All those people who say, I wish I could just come and get heat and stim, I would pay for that. Well, make an option for that. Maybe set up a few hundred square feet on the side of the building if you can, if there's space, to offer compression, to offer ice and stim, heat and stim, cryotherapy, you name it, whatever you want to do, Theragun, stretching with an athletic trainer. That could be another revenue stream. That diagnostics, we are big believers in diagnostics. Musculoskeletal ultrasound, I think, will be ubiquitous like dry needling is now. Dry needling wasn't around 15 years ago. It is in almost every clinic now. I think you'll see that same thing with musculoskeletal ultrasound. EMGs could be similar. Those are other revenue streams that are not PT specific that could really benefit the business.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's PT, and then there was another one, the newbie.
Oh yeah, the newbie is huge. Garrett Salpeter and the newbie product for neuropathy patients, especially for pain control, for athletes. The newbie's been amazing.
You have podcasts on all these things. Maybe in the description,
Totally.
you should list these as like, here are the podcasts to learn about these cash revenue producing services that are going to dramatically increase your profit margin. I think you've already built that path. I'm thinking about the financial value of your podcast that you've created, man. Like literally, if people apply what they learn here in a way that serves them with a coach, you of all people could be that. Anyway, I feel like I'm like hard selling people on you. They don't need to be hard sold. They already love you. But the point is just this idea of like implementing these things would make life so much better, because you and I have seen it personally and with other people, and that transformation of someone who's like been so worn down, see them like enjoy what they do and have time for their kids. It's the equivalent of how I used to feel as a therapist when I saw a patient come in and go, well, look what I can do with my arm now. I can play with my kids. Like that kind of feeling it's bigger than that to me, because it's so much, this is a more complicated disease to diagnose and treat.
Well, and when you see what's coming down the road, whether it's AI or some kind of software or any other profession that might intrude into physical therapy, having physical therapy as the cash cow just leaves you you're at a sacrifice. I mean, you're vulnerable, right? And so it's always good once you have established some continuity in your physical therapy practice to have other revenue streams that you could count on. I want to say it's a well rehearsed phrase or saying that the wealthiest people have 7 streams of revenue from different sources.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but it goes to the point where having multiple streams of revenue means you could lose 1 or 2 and still get by, right? You're not dealing with a scarcity concept at that point. You have abundance. And so having other things to rely on was really helpful for us, even when we were considering diagnostics, like, hey, if PT went to crap, there's always a need for EMG, and we could go perform some EMG somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Robots aren't doing that yet.
No, and nor will they. I don't think they ever will with needles. There is no way, man. The technique it takes to go into a muscle with a needle and do that repeatedly and not have the person punch you, that's a gift. That's a
That's right. But it also goes further, and it's something that it's talked about, maybe not too much, but I see it on occasion in the Impact magazine, is having some form of real estate, right? So I think that's something that you and I have banked on. We've owned the real estate in which our clinics have performed out of. And that is a form of wealth that the income from that definitely helps when you consider having multiple streams of revenue.
Well, yes, and I lean on you as the expert in that piece. You and I started that journey together, but it was you who started that idea back in 2006. You and I bought our first building together the year before the biggest crash. And I don't want to speak on behalf of you, but like, I know I never cared that we bought it at $500,000 and it went down to 250,000. Mm-hmm. Never cared that it lost 50% of its value, because it was part of the PT clinic that was in it.
Right.
And that we were always able to produce rent for it. So it was never a big deal. But you have since gone on. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was hoping to highlight that as like, there's good, better, best. Like, the good thing would be to leverage the tools, right? The good thing is AI tools, learning how to pivot into those. Better is creating similar revenue streams in the PT space, like the newbie, the HODs, like that's better, because now we're, dropping insurances. That's much better. The best is to have this diverse portfolio outside of PT and real estate being together. So good, better, best, right? Pivoting into tools, good. Better is pivoting the business model a little. Best is diversifying our investment portfolio dramatically. And we don't have anyone guiding that. And I'm leaning to you and hoping that you'll be that person, because how you've helped me is big. My favorite money coming in has been real estate money, because, I work the least for it. And not only do I get a cash flow from it, but the investment itself is becoming more objectively valuable over time. And I've had that privilege of experiencing it. And it really speaks to this one phrase I heard as like making it true for me, which is that to get wealthy, we have to niche, right? To get wealthy, we have to niche. In this case, it's like put all of our time and energy into a PT practice. To get rich, then we diversify. You do that in reverse order, you can't really make progress. But once we have a strong asset like a PT practice, we can leverage the proceeds from that to start creating a diverse investment portfolio that starts to produce revenue for us. And so why don't you share what you've been working on, and I've been gleaning a little bit from here and there on, in terms of like how you've been building wealth over the last few years.
Well, we have to preface all of this by saying we're not financial advisors, right?
No, we're not financial advisors. We're not real estate agents.
You need to talk to Eric Miller at Econologics, or you need to talk to some kind of financial advisor if you're going to consider any kind of investment vehicles, right? But one of the things that's helped us, because even selling the practices that we did almost 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago?
5 years.
Was a chunk of change, which is nice, right? That got us rich. What will maintain wealth throughout time and even pass on to generations. Now you're talking about, I don't know, cash value life insurance plans, annuities. I don't sell those, but I'm in some of those, right? I mean, you have your mutual funds and Roth IRAs, and they need to be contributed to, and they should be. But even
and your cryptocurrencies.
And your crypto, yeah.
I'm actually a big believer in this, but yeah.
There's a place for it, right? As I would recommend a small percentage of your wealth in cryptocurrencies, but some percentage of your wealth, right?
30%.
Maybe 50. Maybe your life savings. But a small percentage. But real estate can be huge, right? It's something that we invested in with our clinics over time. And it wasn't until after, I don't know if you noticed it, but it wasn't until after we sold that I recognized the gold that I had in the real estate that I had purchased, 10 years earlier?
Yeah.
I didn't even consider it like an asset of mine. It was just there collecting appreciation, giving me depreciation, offsetting some taxes. And at the time I didn't charge myself a lot, so there wasn't a lot of cash flow. But when I had another tenant in there, all of a sudden I had this massive passive cash flow that was pretty amazing, and a lot of equity.
Yeah, totally.
And then leveraging that, I mean, you can do whatever you want with it once it's paid off, of course, but you can also leverage that in a 1031 exchange to take the equity out and put as down payments towards larger properties that could cash flow greater, right? So, and that's the whole idea behind Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or Robert Kiyosaki, whether the story was true or not. And I think they decided it was false. The concept is the same.
You lied about that story?
I'm pretty sure that, yeah, it's been debunked.
I've heard controversy. I didn't realize that was where they were landing. I'm going to agree with you. I feel betrayed, because it's a great book. Go ahead.
Oh, it's great. I would always recommend people read it. I just don't know if the story's true. That's all. But the idea is, yeah, you invest in something like this so that it will grow over time. And it's a long game play. This doesn't happen year after year after year, but you hold on to something, let it grow over a few years, you sell it, take the equity out, buy something a little bit bigger, as an investment, and it cash flows a little bit more. Again, it appreciates, you write off the depreciation, and then you, a few years later, turn around and do that again. And that's how people start to accrue some real estate portfolio that can really work for them passively, right? So
yeah, and you know people who do that, and it's not just a supplement. In some cases, like it's a lot of money. Like it
becomes the basic foundation for their income flow, and to the point where a physical therapy clinic's income flow is like, oh, that's nice. Right.
Yeah.
The real estate can really become the foundation that covers your expenses, no matter what lifestyle you're living. And then what you get from the clinic can just be added to it to put in retirement vehicles or to help fund an even greater lifestyle if that's what you want. So yeah, that's something that, since you brought it up, is I'm looking at starting another podcast regarding the path to wealth for private practice owners, because we talk about financials here on the clinic, and I'll have Eric Miller on, and those are some of my favorite podcasts. So I'm already in my sandbox, my play zone. But to start talking with other wealth professionals, it could be CPAs, it could be financial advisors, it could be real estate people, it could be any number of influencers in the wealth building space, about how private practice owners can leverage what they have to generate more wealth that's not specific to their practice. How can they leverage those funds and actually generate wealth? Because as you've noticed, as I've noticed, there aren't a lot of old PT practitioners. Like the 60-year-old, the 70-year-old, not like the dentists and the doctors that will, practice until they're 80. It's just not the case with PTs. It's a demanding job, but if that's all you know how to do and all you can do, then that makes for it puts you in a bind when you can no longer do that physically.
Totally.
Having some of that, something else can really help you.
Yeah, I think the idea is being able to submit yourself into your practice by choice. And I wonder, Nathan, if people were making, and whoever's listening, ask yourself this. If I was making 6 figures a month off of my other investments, how would I show up differently in my practice? I'm sure a lot of PTs are so burned out. They're like, I wouldn't even do my practice. It's like, okay, you got into it for a reason. Now, I bet PTs who stay in it would have no problem asking for the $150 cash pay piece. Because what we don't realize, part of the reason that we're not bold in our sales is because we're afraid, because we need them to come. We're so desperate for money that if we're being really honest with ourselves, it's because we need that $30 UHC check added together with all the other patient visits, just so I have enough to cover my bills and maybe go on a vacation. If I pivot from that, what would happen? Like the fear of that is what's keeping us, and it's selfish, very selfish. So if you're feeling judged, it's total judgment. I'm judging all of us. Like I'm 100%. Yeah. And I'm not like saying you're a bad person. I'm saying like, this is it though, that this is really what we're doing. So if we all think about it, if we were all like 100 grand, I bet a lot of people would still treat, but they would only treat if it reimbursed at a certain level because they don't have to. And then and then guess what? People go, oh, physical therapy is worth more. We'd stop decommoditizing it. By the way, I have to pause what I'm saying and just go, did everyone listen to what Nathan just said? He just dropped a huge reveal that there's a new podcast coming to help you solve this problem. I didn't know Nathan was going to drop that. That is massive. I will tell you, as someone who's been with Nathan for the past years, it is really clear that this is an area of expertise that he will be able to expand upon. And like you said, Nathan, you're not you're not certified in financial planning. You're not an expert in a certified sense, but in my world, what you have is more valuable, which is the practitioner's experience, the private practice owner's background, pivoting into that world. You've done it better than anyone I've known. And that's an area of expertise that, like, I would just encourage you to say, yeah, I'm an expert in helping PT practice owners develop a diversified wealth portfolio. Not saying that you're like the expert to go to for annuities. Like I'm saying, but you know in your network who is.
Right.
And that's more valuable. So huge congratulations to you on this new endeavor. And I'm gonna totally tune into that.
Well, you're gonna be on it, I'm sure, at some point. How can I not have you?
How would I be on it? I don't know.
I need to bring Mr. Yuckity Yuck on and tell
everybody. Let's talk about money. When you did say CPAs, when you were talking about CPAs being on the podcast, my initial reaction was like, maybe like a high personality piece.
Maybe not a CPA per se.
Or like that diamond in the rough that has like a good sense of humor. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. A really sexy bookkeeper, maybe.
You can say that anymore. A sexy bookkeeper.
I didn't say which gender.
Hey guys, welcome to Nathan's podcast.
I love numbers.
That's what I'll do. I'll be your guest, but what I'll do is I'll pretend to be other like more uptone versions of like boring financial personality types.
Yeah, you come on as the make believe CPA.
Yes, and then when you ask me questions about investing, like I don't know.
What would you tell your clients to do?
What would you do, Nathan Shields?
That's funny. Oh, well, I love talking about some of this stuff because it is true. If we're going to consider what does the PT landscape look like in 5 to 10 years, if it's anything like it is now, I just have no hope for it, honestly.
Yeah. It's going down, man. Like this shit is sinking. Like there is no question. It is going under. In a traditional format, yeah.
Well, Yeah, I mean, you have to do something different than what you're currently used to. And unfortunately, physical therapists are they're not different than anyone else, but they don't like change, and you switch EMRs and their whole world is upside down, and that's understandable. But even adding something that's beneficial, like musculoskeletal ultrasound or AI, people are like, why would that help me? Why would that, how does that help the patients? And you're like, are you serious, dude? Or dropping the insurances. But my community needs me. Who else is going to take them? I'm like, yeah, stabbing yourself in the back so you can be a martyr for the patients.
I know we're going to alienate the entire audience here, but it's the reason we do it is because that was us. And I'll tell you, it's so funny because I remember my first coach ever. It wasn't really a coach, a mentor, David Berg. He told me, he's like, so tell me about your practice. And I was kind of like doing what typical PT owners do. I'm kind of the big deal with my patients. I don't know if you know that, He's like, oh, you'll get over, you still care about patient care personally. He goes, you'll get over that. And I thought he was like challenging me to a duel. I was like, how dare you, sir? How dare you? Good day. I said good day. Like I was so mad at this guy for suggesting that like my heart had anything to do with anything other than patient care, but I understand what he meant. And it's so funny because I actually think part of that like resistance to change and that fear of the change comes from the fact that our industry acts like and has been treated like an abused stray dog. Like it's so true. Like for many PT owners that are the craziest thing for me is when I'm working with the PT owner and they discover that they're amazing at business. Like that moment is because PT is one of the harder businesses we could ever own. So we organically are way better than we think we are just because we don't see a lot of money. We self-judge and we don't have anything to compare it against. So when we're working with somebody and they can start to believe that they're actually amazing, they go from being that battered dog to being, top dog. It's really cool. But I get it. I get why they complain about every little change, even though you and I, I've complained to you very directly personally that with my clients, when I'm asking them to make these changes, it drives me insane because they're like, well, I don't want to miss that dime when I'm picking up that dollar. I'm like, gosh, but I get it. You've also you've been abused by the system in a sense. You've been, it's been a hard call for a lot of PT owners for a long time. So I'm hoping this podcast episode will be like a wake up call and a bit of a beacon of hope and just like get them going in the right direction.
Yeah. Just do something. Well, what are you working on nowadays that if people wanted to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you now?
So so of course I have the medical billing company. That's going great. I will tell you that we were backed out for 6 months in the black billing. Yep. We are backed out 6 months for new clients. So today, filming this, we're in June. I don't know when it's going to air, but we can't accept clients until January, which, isn't very exciting for a lot of PT owners, but that's also kind of cool. Then the main things that I do with PT owners directly is Rockstar Recruiter still. I'm still helping PTs recruit. I told you earlier that I had a group meeting this morning. I meet with my group twice a month. And this morning there was 8 people on the call and 4 of them had a PT hire last week.
No way.
Like in an industry where people are struggling, I honestly am surprised that the program is actually that effective, to be honest. Like, always like, what the crap? And then, as you know, I'm looking at launching a new program called Rockstar Director with a common partner of ours, Michelle Bambanek, where she will literally train physical therapy directors for you to help them run your practice for you. So if you want any information on any of that stuff, just give me a call. Let me know. Yeah, that's it.
Well, how do they find you? Or is it your email? So
have them come through you. Just email Nathan and Nathan will do an email.
I will hook you up with Will. Whatever you need from Will, I will hook you up. No problem. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for joining me today. It is awesome to have you on again.
Okay. Thank you.